Good day, this is April 24th, 2026, and today's developments are not background noise, they are the signal. Stay with me, because we are going to break all of it down, point by point, with real clarity. Let's start with the biggest diplomatic move happening as you watch this video. Iran's Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, is expected to land in Islamabad, Pakistan today, Friday, April 24th. According to CNN, Al Jazeera, and Pakistani state broadcaster sources, he is arriving with a small team for consultations. From there, he will travel to Muscat, Oman, and then on to Moscow, Russia. Now, here is the critical detail you need to understand. Araghchi is not expected to meet directly with any U.S. representatives in Islamabad. According to a U.S. source cited by CNN, there will be no face-to-face Iran-U.S. dialogue in this round of talks. So what is the point of the trip? Pakistan has been serving as the key go-between, the back channel, between Washington and Tehran since the U.S.-Israeli air war began on February 28th. Pakistani mediators are hoping that this Araghchi visit will lay the groundwork for a planned second round of direct talks between Iran and the United States. The first round in Islamabad collapsed over the weekend when the two sides found themselves too far apart on key issues. On his way out, Araghchi posted on X, formerly Twitter, saying, "Our neighbors are our priority." He added that he would be closely coordinating with partners on bilateral matters and consulting on regional developments. Translated from diplomatic language into plain English, Iran is going around America's blockade pressure by shoring up support from Pakistan, Oman, and Russia, three countries that all have varying degrees of influence over the negotiations. Oman has historically played the quiet but crucial role of a discreet mediator between the U.S. and Iran. Russia, of course, has its own interest in seeing this war end without a full American victory, or in keeping it going long enough to drain U.S. military resources. The visit raises cautious hope that talks could resume, but make no mistake, the two sides remain far apart, and while the foreign minister is flying diplomatic routes, the military situation on the ground and at sea is anything but calm. President Donald Trump, when asked by reporters on Thursday whether he could give a timeline for ending the war with Iran, had a very simple answer: "Don't rush me." He also said there is no time pressure and no time frame on when this conflict ends. And this was not an off-the-cuff remark. He doubled down on it multiple times across different interactions with reporters this week. Now think about what that means in practice. The Strait of Hormuz, which carries approximately 20 million barrels of oil per day, roughly 25% of all seaborne oil trade in the world, is effectively shut. The International Energy Agency's head, Fatih Birolus, told CNBC on Thursday that the world is facing the biggest energy security threat in history. If this closure continues, it could lead to energy rationing and rising inflation across the globe, and yet, no timeline. Trump's calculation appears to be that maximum economic pressure on Iran through the naval blockade, through the halt in Iranian oil exports, through the seizure of Iranian tankers, will eventually force Tehran to accept terms. He wants the best deal possible with Iran, as he put it. And he believes Iran is hurting badly enough economically that time is on his side. But here's the counter-argument that many experts are making. The longer this war drags on, the more the U.S. military stockpile drains, and the bigger the risk to American strategic readiness in other parts of the world. We will get to that in the next segment, because those numbers are genuinely alarming. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio struck a more optimistic tone. After the second round of White House-hosted peace talks between Israel and Lebanon ended Thursday night, Rubio said that Trump's personal involvement made it possible to get a ceasefire extension and expressed hope for permanent peace. But Lebanon and Iran are linked, and any hope of a broader settlement with Tehran is inseparable from what happens in Beirut. This is the story that the New York Times and CNN both broke this week, and it is arguably the most important strategic development of this entire conflict. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, one of Washington's most respected defense think tanks, has conducted a detailed assessment of U.S. weapons stockpiles since the war began on February 28th. The findings are, to put it plainly, deeply worrying. Here are the numbers. As of this week, the U.S. military has expended at least 45% COGS of its stockpile of precision strike missiles. It has used at least half-dollars of its entire inventory of Chiledi missiles. The Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, which is designed specifically to shoot down incoming ballistic missiles. It has burned through nearly 50% of its Patriot air defense interceptor missiles. On top of that, approximately 30% of Tomahawk cruise missiles are gone. More than 20% of long-range joint air-to-surface standoff missiles have been expended, and roughly 20% of SM-3 and SM-6 naval missiles have been used. And here's the part that keeps defense analysts up at night. It would take 4 to 5 years to replace most of these systems. Manufacturing lead times have stretched to 36 months or more because global demand for precision munitions has already outpaced production capacity thanks to Ukraine, Taiwan tensions, and now this war. The implications of this are massive. As one source cited by CNN put it, the number of critical munitions remaining in U.S. stockpiles is no longer sufficient to face an equally powerful adversary such as China, and it will likely take years before inventory levels return to pre-war numbers. Japan was reportedly informed that its deliveries of Stockpile 400 Tomahawk missiles, already purchased and awaiting delivery, may be delayed because of the Iran war. That is a direct blow to Japan's ability to deter China in the Pacific. The Pentagon, for its part, issued a statement saying the military has everything it needs to execute at the time and place of the president's choosing. But several U.S. senators, including Arizona Democrat Mark Kelly, a former astronaut and combat pilot, have openly raised alarms. Kelly said, "The Iranians have a huge stockpile of Shahed drones and ballistic missiles. At some point, this becomes a math problem." That is the uncomfortable reality sitting underneath every other headline today. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth held a press conference at the Pentagon on Friday morning, and the message was unambiguous. The U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports, which began on April 13th after the Islamabad talks collapsed, will continue, as long as it takes. There is no off-ramp on the blockade unless Iran comes to the table and meets American conditions. And Hegseth went a step further. He turned to America's European allies and said quite bluntly, the time for free riding is over. He argued that the standoff in the Strait of Hormuz is much more their fight than ours, because Europe depends far more on Middle Eastern oil and LNG than the United States does. That is a significant statement. It is essentially Washington saying, if you want the strait reopened, get involved. Stop watching from the sidelines. Now, where does the blockade stand operationally? U.S. Central Command confirmed on Thursday that the U.S. military has redirected at least 33 ships since the blockade began on April 13th. However, and this is an important nuance, maritime intelligence firm Lloyd's List Intelligence Cars reported that at least 26 Shadow Fleet vessels had breached the U.S. blockade line as of Monday. And on Wednesday, 10 more Shadow Fleet tankers were heading toward the Persian Gulf area. The Shadow Fleet, vessels operating without clear ownership or insurance, often carrying Iranian oil in defiance of sanctions, continues to find gaps in the enforcement net. Iran's response to the blockade has been aggressive. Tehran seized 2 cargo ships this week, the MSC Francesca and the Anam Epaminondas. Iranian state media released dramatic video of masked IRGC commandos fast roping onto the deck of the Francesca, raising rifles as they moved through the vessel. The Philippines government confirmed that 15 of its citizens, seafarers, were on the 2 seized ships. Manila said they were safe and unharmed, but the situation remains tense. Iran has also been collecting e-tolls from ships using its approved channel through Hormuz, with some vessels reportedly paying $2 million for a single passage. Iran's deputy parliament speaker confirmed that the first toll revenue has already been deposited into the central bank. Meanwhile, Trump on Thursday said he had ordered the U.S. Navy to shoot and kill any Iranian boat caught laying mines in the strait and directed mine clearance operations to be intensified at tripled-up intensity. He also confirmed that a second Iranian oil tanker was seized in the Indian Ocean. Now let's talk about the country that is arguably playing the most sophisticated long game in this entire conflict: China. On the surface, Beijing's position looks like principled neutrality. China has publicly condemned the U.S. blockade as dangerous and irresponsible. Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun issued a direct warning to Washington. We have trade and energy agreements with Iran. We expect others not to interfere in our affairs. The Strait of Hormuz is open to us. Chinese President Xi Jinping called Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman this week and said the Strait of Hormuz should maintain normal passage, as this serves the common interests of regional countries and the international community. China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, has been extraordinarily active, making 26 phone calls between February 28th and the April 8th ceasefire, reaching out to Gulf states, Iran, Pakistan, and others to push for a diplomatic resolution. And at the United Nations Security Council, China, alongside Russia, vetoed a resolution that would have coordinated member states to escort ships through Hormuz. Beijing's stated reason, non-intervention. The real reason, analysts say, is that China does not want Western navies to establish a legitimate military presence in the strait that could threaten Chinese vessels. China is, after all, the world's largest buyer of Iranian crude oil. More than 40% of China's oil imports come from the Middle East. Every day the strait stays blocked is a day China's economy takes a hit. But here is where it gets complicated. And this is what the reference thumbnail is pointing at. American intelligence has made a series of accusations about what China is doing behind the scenes. The U.S. accused SMIC, China's state-linked semiconductor company, of supplying chip-making tools to Iran's military. U.S. intelligence also stated that Iran used China's Beidou satellite navigation system to direct attacks across the region. Chinese firms linked to the People's Liberation Army were reportedly marketing our geospatial intelligence about U.S. force positions to Iranian-linked actors. On April 11th, CNN reported that U.S. intelligence believed China was preparing to ship man-portable air defense systems, MANPADS, to Iran through third-party countries. China denied this. And on April 19th, U.S. forces seized a sanctioned Iranian container ship, the MV Tuska, in the Gulf of Oman on a return voyage from China. The ship was reportedly carrying dual-use equipment. When asked about it Thursday, Trump confirmed the seized goods were top secret and declined to name what was found. When reporters asked Trump if he was angry at China for potentially violating the blockade, he said, and this is notable, no. He added, we do the same thing with other countries. That is a remarkable admission of how great power competition actually works beneath the surface of official statements. So what is China actually doing? Analysts from Al Jazeera and others summarize it this way. Beijing wants Iran to survive as a viable, functioning state. Not so damaged that the U.S. and Israel can dictate post-war terms, but not so aggressive that it destabilizes the entire region and drags China into a military confrontation. Peace is good for business. But an Iran that is completely defeated is bad for China's strategic position in the Middle East. China is threading the needle, and for now, it is doing it remarkably well. In Lebanon, the picture is mixed, and in some ways, darker than the headlines suggest. On the positive side, Trump announced Thursday night, after a second round of White House peace talks between Israeli and Lebanese representatives, that the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, which had been set to expire this weekend, has been extended by 3 weeks. The initial ceasefire had been agreed on April 16th. Trump was flanked by Secretary of State Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, and the U.S. ambassadors to both Israel and Lebanon when he made the announcement. Rubio called it a breakthrough made possible by Trump's personal involvement, but Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group that is Israel's primary adversary in Lebanon, was not represented at the White House talks, and their response was cold. A Hezbollah politician called the extension meaningless, and the violence has not stopped. The Israeli military confirmed on Friday morning that it carried out new airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon overnight. Lebanon's state news agency reported strikes in multiple towns. Just hours before Trump's announcement, Hezbollah launched rockets toward northern Israel. The IDF said it intercepted them. Then there is this. 5 United Nations UNIFIL peacekeepers have been killed in Lebanon since March 2nd. On Wednesday, a French peacekeeper died after being injured by fire from what the UN assessed were non-state armed groups, presumably Hezbollah. The UN issued a sharp statement. Deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international humanitarian law and may amount to war crimes. Lebanon's prime minister responded to the killing of Lebanese journalist Amal Khalil in an Israeli airstrike this week by accusing Israel of war crimes. Ochi, Israel denied targeting journalists. We cannot close this report without pausing on the human cost of this war, because behind all the diplomacy and strategy are real people. Iran's forensics chief has reported that nearly 3,400 people have been killed inside Iran since the U.S.-Israeli strikes began on February 28th. In Lebanon, more than 2,200 people have been killed. In the Gulf states caught in the crossfire, 32 people have died. Inside Israel, 23 people have been killed, and 13 U.S. service members have died in this war, with 2 more dying from non-combat causes. Pope Leo XIV, speaking from the papal plane on Thursday during his return from Africa, said both parties needed to stop the spiral of violence before it becomes an irreparable abyss. He condemned the war in unusually direct terms and has been publicly at odds with Trump over it throughout the conflict. These are not numbers, these are people. And every day this war continues without a clear diplomatic exit, the list grows longer. So here is where we stand on April 24th, 2026. Iran's foreign minister is on a diplomatic circuit through Pakistan, Oman, and Russia, trying to build enough international support to force a second round of US-Iran talks. Trump says there is no rush. Hegseth says the blockade holds indefinitely. The US military has burned through nearly half its most critical missiles. China is playing both sides, publicly calling for peace, privately keeping Iran operational. Lebanon's ceasefire was extended, but the shooting hasn't stopped, and the world's most important oil route remains a war zone. This is not a regional conflict anymore. The economic shockwaves from Hormuz are rippling through every country on Earth. The missile shortage is a direct threat to U.S. deterrence in the Pacific, and the diplomatic gap between Washington and Tehran remains enormous. What happens next depends on whether Araghchi's visit to Islamabad can restart talks, and whether both sides decide that the cost of continuing this war is greater than the cost of making a deal. We will be watching every development closely. If you found this breakdown useful, please share it, because understanding what is happening here matters. Subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and we will see you in the next update.